The Ethics of Scholarly Writing. Welcome to this lecture on the ethics of scholarly writing. This is a critical topic for all of us as doctoral students and future scholar practitioners. Writing at the doctoral level is not only about demonstrating knowledge and skill. It is fundamentally about embodying the ethical responsibilities of scholarship. As you progress through your doctoral program and into your careers as leaders and researchers, you are expected to engage with integrity, honesty, and care when producing academic work. This lecture will emphasize 4 key areas. First, academic integrity and plagiarism, understanding what these concepts mean and why they matter at the doctoral level. Second, the responsible use of technology, including generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, and Google Gemini, which have become part of the academic landscape but introduce significant ethical challenges. Third, issues of authorship, ownership, and credit. Who deserves to be listed as an author? And how do we ensure transparency and fairness in collaborative work? And fourth, bias, copyright, and broader societal issues in writing, recognizing that our ethical responsibilities extend beyond avoiding plagiarism to thinking about the larger impact of our scholarly work. Your ability to write ethically is both an academic requirement and a reflection of your professional values. The habits you form during your doctoral studies will stay with you throughout your career, shaping not only your academic reputation but also your character as a leader and decision maker. The 5 pillars of academic integrity. Let's begin with academic integrity, which is the foundation of all scholarly work. Understanding and articulating its importance is crucial for success in the doctoral program and beyond. Academic integrity is about doing the right thing in your studies and research. It is a commitment to honesty, fairness, trust, respect, and responsibility. Whether you're writing a paper, conducting research, or taking an exam, maintaining integrity is non-negotiable. The concept of academic integrity rests on 5 pillars. First, honesty. Be truthful in every aspect of your academic work. This means representing your own ideas accurately and not misrepresenting the work of others as your own. Plagiarizing others' work or fabricating data is a severe breach of integrity that can have serious consequences for your academic career and professional reputation. Second, fairness. Strive for fairness in all your academic interactions. This means avoiding seeking or giving unauthorized assistance. It means competing on a level playing field where everyone's work is evaluated based on their own merits and efforts. Third, trust. Work to build trust with your peers, professors, and the academic community at large. Trust is the glue that holds the academic enterprise together. When you submit work, your professors trust that it represents your own thinking and effort. When you cite sources, readers trust that those citations are accurate and verifiable. Fourth, respect. Acknowledge the work and ideas of others. Give credit where it's due. This is not just about following citation rules. It's about recognizing that scholarship is a collective enterprise built on the contributions of many thinkers over time. When we cite sources properly, we show respect for those who came before us and contributed to our understanding. Fifth, responsibility. Take responsibility for your work, understanding that your actions impact the entire academic community. When you maintain high ethical standards, you contribute to the credibility of scholarship as a whole. When you cut corners or engage in misconduct, you damage not only your own reputation, but also the reputation of your institution and your field. Why academic integrity matters. Now you might be thinking, I understand these principles, but why does academic integrity matter so much? Let me give you 5 compelling reasons. First, it upholds the value of your degree. Your doctoral degree is not just a piece of paper. It's a testament to years of hard work, dedication, and intellectual growth. When you maintain academic integrity, you ensure that your degree holds its value and is respected worldwide. Employers, colleagues, and the broader academic community need to trust that a doctoral degree from your institution represents genuine achievement and expertise. If that trust is undermined by academic misconduct, the value of everyone's degree is diminished. Second, it creates a level playing field. Academic integrity ensures that all students are evaluated fairly based on their own merits and efforts. Imagine if some students were allowed to plagiarize or fabricate data while others followed the rules. The entire system of evaluation would become meaningless. Fair evaluation is essential for identifying true excellence and ensuring that opportunities go to those who have jointly earned them. Third, it fosters intellectual growth. When you engage with your work honestly and ethically, you push yourself to develop your own ideas, think critically, and contribute genuinely to your field. There's a temptation, especially when you're busy or stressed, to take shortcuts. But those shortcuts rob you of the opportunity to develop your own thinking, the struggle to articulate your own ideas, to synthesize complex information, to develop original arguments. That's where real learning happens. Fourth, it builds trust. A strong foundation of trust is crucial in academia and in professional life. When you consistently demonstrate integrity, people learn that they can rely on you. Your word means something. Your research can be trusted. This reputation for integrity becomes one of your most valuable professional assets. Fifth, it prepares you for the future. The habits you form during your doctoral studies will stay with you throughout your career. A strong sense of integrity prepares you for ethical decision-making in any professional setting. As business leaders, you'll face complex ethical dilemmas. The practice you get now in making ethical choices about your writing will serve you well when you're making high-stakes decisions about business strategy, personnel, or corporate governance. Practical tips for upholding academic integrity. So how do we put these principles into practice? Let me offer 5 practical tips. First, know your institution's policies. Make sure you are well versed in your university's academic integrity policies. Read the student handbook. Understand what constitutes plagiarism, what the consequences are for violations, and what resources are available to help you avoid problems. Ignorance is not an excuse. You're responsible for knowing and following these policies. Second, develop strong research skills. Learn how to properly cite sources, paraphrase effectively, and engage with existing knowledge ethically. This is a skill set that takes practice. Learn the citation style required in your field. For most of you, that's APA format. Practice paraphrasing by reading a passage, setting it aside, and then writing the idea in your own words without looking at the original. Third, seek guidance when needed. Never hesitate to reach out to professors, mentors, or academic advisors if you're unsure about anything. It's much better to ask a question before you submit an assignment than to face accusations of misconduct afterward. Your professors want to help you succeed. They'd much rather answer a question about citation than deal with a plagiarism case. Fourth, use academic integrity tools. Familiarize yourself with plagiarism detection tools like Turnitin and citation guides. Many universities provide access to these tools so you can check your own work before submitting it. Use them. They're there to help you identify potential problems before they become serious issues. Fifth, reflect on your values. Take time to reflect on the importance of integrity, not just in academia, but in all areas of life. Think about the kind of person you want to be, the kind of leader you want to become. Let those values guide your choices, even when no one is watching. Remember, integrity is not just about following rules. It's about building character and setting a foundation for a life of ethical practice. Plagiarism, the most common form of scientific misconduct. Now let's turn to plagiarism, which is the most common form of scientific misconduct. According to Carver and colleagues, 2011, plagiarism is defined by the U.S. Office of Science and Technology as the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit, including those obtained through confidential review of others' research, proposals, and manuscripts. It's important to understand that plagiarism can be both intentional and unintentional. Intentional plagiarism occurs when someone knowingly lifts text directly from other authors without giving appropriate credit. This is the most serious form and is clearly unethical. The common factors underlying intentional plagiarism are a strong desire to succeed, coupled with a lack of time and lack of interest in learning how to write properly. But plagiarism can also be unintentional. Inexperienced writers and trainees may not be aware of the importance of strict adherence to plagiarism guidelines. They may be confused by vague and conflicting definitions of plagiarism. Faculty may assume that doctoral students understand what plagiarism is and how to avoid it, but that assumption isn't always correct. Authors often have difficulty paraphrasing complex ideas or methods and may inadvertently use language that's too close to the original source. Let me give you a case study from Carver et al., 2011, to illustrate this. A graduate student was preparing his dissertation and used a colleague's previously submitted paper to compose much of the introduction and background sections. When the professor recognized the duplication and questioned the student argued that the methods, results, and discussion sections were all original, and the background was mostly common knowledge. He admitted to using the colleague's paper, but felt that he had changed enough words, and that citation wasn't necessary because the information was common knowledge. This student was wrong on several counts. First, even if information is common knowledge in a field, it's still best practice to cite sources, both to give credit to the original author and to aid readers in finding the information provided. Second, changing a few words here and there doesn't make text original. That's still plagiarism. Third, copying large sections of text, even from a colleague's unpublished work, is a serious ethical violation. Beyond simple plagiarism, there are two other forms you need to be aware of. Self-plagiarism, also known as text recycling, occurs when an author copies large parts of one of his or her previous papers word for word. This can be difficult to define, since there's no consensus on how many words of copied text constitute self-plagiarism. While the ethical breach associated with self-plagiarism is generally less severe than with intentional plagiarism, it's still considered scientific misconduct. Copying sections of previously published text, for example the methods section of a research paper, is occasionally legitimate, but copying large parts of an original paper is considered self-plagiarism. Duplicate publication is a form of plagiarism that occurs when an author submits for publication a previously published work as if it were original. This is particularly problematic because it distorts the scientific record. It implies that more than one study has independently achieved the reported results, when in fact it's the same study being reported twice. Duplicate publication wastes the time of editors and reviewers, and it misleads readers who have a right to expect that what they read is original content. Slide 6. Plagiarism and the use of AI. Now let's talk about a relatively new challenge, generative AI tools. ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, and similar tools have become part of the academic landscape, but their use introduces significant ethical challenges that we need to understand. First, there's the issue of ownership of ideas. AI output often repurposes content without attribution. These systems are trained on vast amounts of text from the internet, including copyrighted works, and they generate responses by predicting what words should come next based on patterns in that training data. When you use AI-generated text, you're potentially using ideas and language from sources that aren't cited or even identifiable. Second, there's the problem of ungrounded information. Many AI systems provide answers without sources or with fabricated citations. The AI doesn't actually know anything, it's just predicting likely word sequences. It can't distinguish between accurate information and plausible-sounding nonsense. Third, AI systems are prone to what researchers call hallucinations. They may generate false references or incorrect data. I've seen cases where students submitted papers with citations to articles that don't exist. The AI simply made them up because they sounded plausible. For these reasons, our course policy is clear. The use of AI-generated text in assignments is strictly prohibited. Any insights gained through AI must be traced to legitimate scholarly sources. Let me give you an applied example. Suppose you're writing about leadership theory and you ask ChatGPT to explain transformational leadership. It gives you a nice paragraph that sounds authoritative. You copy that paragraph into your paper and cite it as ChatGPT 2024. That's still plagiarism. Why? Because the AI didn't originate those ideas. It synthesized them from sources in its training data, sources that aren't cited and that you haven't verified. Instead, you need to trace the claims back to peer-reviewed literature. Look up the original sources on transformational leadership and cite those sources directly. Now, does this mean you can never use AI tools? Not necessarily. You might use them for brainstorming or to help you understand a concept, But you must then verify that information through legitimate scholarly sources and cite those sources, not the AI. And you should never submit AI-generated text as your own work. Authorship and ownership. Let's turn now to the issue of authorship. Ethical writing requires that credit is given appropriately, and this becomes particularly important when you're working on collaborative projects. Authorship issues are often contentious and can affect personal and professional relationships. The major issues related to authorship include determination of author responsibilities and author order. There's tremendous pressure among academicians to be listed on as many publications as possible, and students in many graduate programs are required to publish one or more first authored papers. However, awarding authorship to people who have not made sufficient contributions conveys benefit to them inappropriately, and it reduces the benefit to those who actually contributed to the work. Let me share another case study from Carver et al., 2011. A junior investigator prepared a case series and review article based on a group of interesting patients he had cared for. He worked with one student and a colleague to review the cases and prepare the manuscript, and they were both listed as authors on the paper. When the manuscript was close to completion, the investigator asked his senior mentor to review the manuscript. The mentor returned the paper with several edits and comments and added his name as the senior author on the paper. Was this appropriate? It depends. If the senior mentor made substantial contributions to the intellectual content of the paper, then authorship might be warranted. But if the mentor simply made a few editorial suggestions, that doesn't rise to the level of authorship. That's more appropriately acknowledged in a note of thanks. Carver and colleagues describe several forms of authorship abuse that you should be aware of. Coercion authorship occurs when intimidation is used to gain authorship. This can happen when a senior person pressures a more junior person or a student to include their name on a paper to which they have not contributed enough to qualify for authorship. This is particularly problematic because of the power differential involved. Honorary guest or gift authorship is awarded to acknowledge friendship, to gain favor, or to give the paper a greater sense of legitimacy. It's still quite common for authors to add well-known senior investigators as authors to their papers, even though the senior person may not have made significant contributions. This is unethical because it misrepresents who actually did the work. Mutual support authorship occurs when two or more authors agree to cite each other's work or list each other as authors to inflate their publication records. The key principle here is that authorship should reflect genuine intellectual contribution to the work. The International Committee of Medical Journal Editors has established criteria for authorship that many fields have adopted. According to these criteria, authorship requires 1. Substantial contributions to conception and design or acquisition of data or analysis and interpretation of data. 2. Drafting the article or revising it critically for important intellectual content. 3. Final approval of the version to be published. And 4th, agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. All 4 criteria must be met. Simply providing funding, collecting data, or supervising a research group is not sufficient for authorship. It's also important to understand that authorship signals accountability. Your name on a paper means you stand behind its accuracy and integrity. You're saying that you've reviewed the work, you believe it's sound, and you're willing to take public responsibility for it. Bias and fairness in writing. Now let's discuss bias and fairness in writing. Bias can creep into writing when information is distorted or perspectives are ignored. As doctoral writers, you must be vigilant about this. First, use inclusive, respectful, and accurate language. Avoid language that stereotypes or marginalize particular groups. The APA Publication Manual provides detailed guidance on bias-free language, covering issues of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and age. Second, represent multiple perspectives in your analysis. Don't cherry-pick evidence that supports your preferred conclusion while ignoring contradictory evidence. Present competing viewpoints fairly, even if you ultimately argue against them. This is what we mean by scholarly objectivity. Not that you don't have a point of view, but that you engage with alternative perspectives honestly and thoroughly. Third, avoid unreasoned judgments or misrepresentations. Support your claims with evidence. Distinguish between your opinions and established facts. Be careful about making sweeping generalizations based on limited evidence. Let me give you an example from the lecture notes. When analyzing return to office policies, you should evaluate both management rationales and employee concerns, rather than privileging one viewpoint. Management might argue that in-person work fosters collaboration and organizational culture. Employees might argue that remote work offers better work-life balance and eliminates commuting time. A balanced analysis would consider both perspectives, examine the empirical evidence on productivity and satisfaction, and perhaps identify conditions under which each approach works best. Copyright and intellectual property. Respecting intellectual property is central to academic ethics. Let me outline 3 key practices. First, quote selectively and always cite sources. When you use someone else's exact words, put them in quotation marks and provide a citation. Direct quotes should be used sparingly, only when the original language is particularly powerful or precise. Most of the time, you should paraphrase. Second, paraphrase responsibly with attribution. Paraphrasing means restating someone else's ideas in your own words, but even when you paraphrase, you must cite the source. The ideas aren't yours, even if the words are. Good paraphrasing involves reading the original passage, setting it aside, thinking about what it means, and then writing that meaning in your own words without looking at the original. Then you check to make sure you've captured the meaning accurately and that your language is sufficiently different from the original. Third, secure permissions or rely on fair use for figures, charts, or graphics. If you want to reproduce a table or figure from a published source, you generally need to get permission from the copyright holder. Alternatively, you can rely on the doctrine of fair use, which allows limited use of copyrighted material for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. However, fair use is a complex legal doctrine, and when in doubt, it's better to seek permission or create your own figures based on the data. Generative AI complicates copyright because its training data often includes copyrighted works without consent. There are ongoing legal battles about whether this constitutes copyright infringement. For our purposes, the key point is this: avoid relying on AI outputs that could inadvertently pass along unlicensed content. If you use AI to help you understand a concept, verify that information through legitimate sources and cite those sources, not the AI. The Good Writer, a Virtue Ethics Perspective. Now I want to introduce you to a different way of thinking about ethics in writing, one that comes from the work of John Duffy. In his 2017 article, The Good Writer, Virtue Ethics, and the Teaching of Writing, Duffy suggests that we think about ethical writing not just in terms of rules or outcomes, but in terms of character. Most ethical theories fall into one of 2 categories. Deontology is the ethics of rules and obligations, the ethics of should and ought. It asks, what are my duties? Consequentialism is the ethics of outcomes and results. It asks, what will produce the best consequences? Both of these approaches have value, but Duffy argues that they don't fully capture what it means to be an ethical writer. Instead, Duffy proposes that we think in terms of virtue ethics, which focuses on character and asks, what kind of person do I want to be? This approach goes back to Aristotle, who wrote about virtues as qualities that make a person good, qualities like honesty, courage, generosity, and practical wisdom. Duffy introduces the concept of rhetorical virtues, the discursive practices that characterize a good writer. These include honesty, presenting information truthfully and without deception. This means not distorting evidence, not misrepresenting the views of others, not exaggerating your claims beyond what your evidence supports. Generosity, engaging with the ideas of others in a fair and open-minded way. This means giving opposing viewpoints a fair hearing, interpreting others' arguments charitably rather than attacking straw men, acknowledging the strengths and positions you ultimately disagree with. Accountability, taking responsibility for your words and their impact. This means standing behind what you write, being willing to defend your claims, acknowledging when you're wrong, and correcting errors when they're discovered. Practical wisdom, making sound ethical judgments in complex situations. This is what Aristotle called phronesis, the ability to discern the right course of action in particular circumstances. It's not just about knowing the rules, but about knowing how to apply them wisely. This virtue ethics perspective encourages us to ask not just what are the rules, but what kind of writer and what kind of person do I want to be? It shifts the focus from compliance to character, from avoiding punishment to cultivating excellence. Think about it this way. You can follow all the citation rules perfectly and still write in a way that's misleading or unfair. You can avoid plagiarism and still fail to engage honestly with the ideas of others. Virtue ethics asks us to aim higher, to cultivate the qualities of character that make us not just rule-following writers, but genuinely good writers. Broader societal issues in writing and AI. Our ethical responsibilities as writers extend beyond avoiding plagiarism and citing sources correctly. We also need to think about the broader societal implications of our writing practices and our use of technology. Consider the digital divide. Not all scholars or professionals have equal access to AI tools, databases, or even reliable internet connections. When we make assumptions about what resources everyone has access to, we may inadvertently create barriers for some students or researchers. Think about privacy. Data entered into AI prompts may be stored and misused. When you paste sensitive information into ChatGPT or similar tools, you may be sharing that information with the company that operates the tool, and you don't always know how they'll use it. This is particularly important if you're working with proprietary business data or information about human subjects. Consider the environmental cost. Training large AI systems consumes vast amounts of energy and contributes to carbon emissions. Some estimates suggest that training a single large language model produces as much carbon as 5 cars over their entire lifetimes. As scholars and business leaders, we need to think about the environmental impact of our technological choices. These issues remind us that ethical writing also means thinking about the societal and environmental consequences of our choices. We're not just individual writers making individual choices. We're participants in larger systems, and our choices have ripple effects. Best practices for ethical writing. Let me summarize some best practices to guide you in your writing. First, plan ahead to avoid cutting corners. Don't wait until the last minute to start writing. When you're rushed, you're more likely to make mistakes, more likely to take shortcuts, more likely to compromise your ethical standards. Give yourself enough time to do the work properly. Second, rely on peer-reviewed, high-quality sources. Not everything on the internet is reliable. Use scholarly databases like Google Scholar or your university library's databases to find credible sources. Look for peer-reviewed journal articles, books from academic presses, reports from reputable organizations. Third, follow APA citation guidelines carefully. Learn the rules and use them consistently. When in doubt, cite. It's better to oversight than to undercite. Fourth, be transparent if you use tools for brainstorming, but never submit AI-generated content. If you use AI to help you understand a concept or to generate ideas, that's fine. But you must then verify that information through legitimate sources and do your own writing. Don't copy and paste AI output into your papers. Fifth, write with honesty and respect, ensuring your voice contributes meaningfully to scholarly conversations. Think about what you're adding to the conversation. What's your unique contribution? What new insight, analysis, or synthesis are you offering? Don't just summarize what others have said. Engage with it, critique it, build on it. Conclusion. Let me conclude with this. The ethics of writing is not simply about avoiding plagiarism. It is about living out the values of honesty, fairness, trust, respect, and responsibility. By committing to these principles, you protect the credibility of your work, the value of your degree, and your reputation as a scholar practitioner. Your writing should always reflect integrity, ensuring that your contributions to academia and practice are trusted, respected, and beyond reproach. Remember, integrity is not just about following rules. It's about building character and setting a foundation for a life of ethical practice. The choices you make now in how you approach your writing and your research will shape the kind of leader you become. As you work on your research, I encourage you to reflect on these principles. Think about the kind of writer you want to be. Think about the kind of scholar practitioner you want to become. Let those aspirations guide your choices. The work in your doctoral program is preparing you not just for a degree, but for a career of leadership and contribution. Make sure that career is built on a foundation of integrity that will serve you well for decades to come. References.